Hello, Druid players! We're going to start this video off first by thanking Danger's Max Roll Guide for giving us our inspiration for our kind of twist on their build. Not super huge, but we are going to include their build guide in the link below. So thanks again, Danger, and let's check out the Lacerate Druid together. Alright, so first we'll cover the gear of the build. We're running a Harlequin's Crest. This gives us some survivability with the life and armor, gives us cooldown reduction, which is going to help us keep Lacerate up, and we also get maximum resource, which is going to give us a damage multiplier thanks to the legendary node that is in the Paragon board that makes ultimate damage scale based on the amount of spirit you have. Then we also get the flat damage reduction and +4 ranks to all skills. For the runes here, we're going to run Neozon. So basically, void health damage while fighting for 2 seconds. So for 8 seconds, we'll get an overpowered crit. Next, we're going to run the Shroud of False Death. Currently, there is a bug where our one spirit boon, Calamity, which we take, which increases the duration of Lacerate. The Shroud, for some reason, is giving you an extra one, so it doubles the duration to 70% duration. So this is almost a must take. Gives you some survivability in all stats, and we don't really need the stealth or the resource generation. They don't hurt, but they're not terrible. Then we're also using Ignivex, which is going to give us more skill points whenever we use one of our abilities. So what I recommend here is if they do fix it where it's no longer giving you the stack of Calamity, since we're running a Lupine Ferocity version of Lacerate, you could potentially switch this out for the Mad Wolf's Glee. Next, for our gloves, we want life, crit strike damage, and then ideally willpower here. We got a lucky hit to make vulnerable. Just gives us another little way to get our enemies vulnerable, so this is fine. And then we want to put on our gauntlets the Vehemence aspect, which makes it so our ultimate skills deal increased damage for 8 all skills do increase damage for 8 seconds after casting an ultimate, and we gain 2 additional ultimate skill points. Next, we're going to run Tybalt's Will. We want Tybalt's Will because whenever we use our ultimate, we become unstoppable. So we get a nice little damage multiplier whenever we use Lacerate. Then on top of that, we're also getting some all stats, some life, some more maximum resources, and some damage reduction, all which are very beneficial. If you're finding you're dying too much, you can lose these pants, and I'd recommend running the Tacets of the Dawning Sky, because these pants will give you enough resistances to make up for any resistances you might be missing. Next, you can run Flicker Step for your boots. These are going to be great. They're going to give you your movement speed. They give you a bit of lightning res. They give you some damage reduction. But the main thing here is we want to have whenever we evade through enemies, we reduce our cooldown by 4 seconds. So it's very easy when we're fighting through the packs and the pits to keep that down and just reset our cooldowns immediately after using Lacerate. And then on top of that, once you're against bosses, being able to evade through the enemy, you will be able to get that cooldown down by 4 seconds, easily getting your Lacerate back up against those bosses. For our weapon, we're going to use a two-handed mace. We want this because a large portion of our damage is going to be coming from overpower damage. So this is going to give us a large source of overpower damage. We want willpower, max life, and critical strike damage for the stats on here. We want the willpower, max life, because those are our main stats, and the life for survivability. And we want the crit damage because the crit damage also scales Lacerate further. Then we want the Lacerate duration and crit strike damage for our tempering here. Oh, and also on the gloves here, again, for tempering, you'll want that crit strike damage as well. Main reason is the scaling on Lacerate with crit strike damage. For our amulet, we're going to run the Malefic Crescent. This is going to increase our damage with Lupine Ferocity. On here, ideally, we want a GA on Willpower or Feral Aptitude. Ideally, if we could get it on Willpower, Feral Aptitude, and Crit Strike damage, both would be great power increasers for the build, especially getting the Crit Strike damage bonus added as extra damage for Lacerate. For our ring, we want Crit Strike damage, Willpower, and Max Life, with the temperings of Crit Strike damage and Lacerate cooldown reduction, just to help bring that cooldown reduction on Lacerate, making it easier to keep it online all the time, and Crit Strike damage is straightforward. For Arida's Inexorable Will, we want a GA on Willpower and a GA on Ultimate Cooldown. These two will be the best for it to keep that Lacerate up, and the increase of power from the Willpower is just too massive to pass up. Moving on to our Spirit Boons, we're taking Gift of the Stag for the Deer boon. This gives us our maximum spirit increase, which is the main reason we're taking this, so we can get that the bonus from the Paragon board for our ultimate damage scaling with our spirit. For our Eagle boon, we are taking Iron Feather for more maximum life, increases the power of our overpower, and Avian Wrath for a crit damage multiplier. For the Wolf boon, we are taking Calamity. We're doing this to extend the duration of Lacerate, so how many hits we get and how long it lasts. That, and it combos with the Shroud of the False Death in giving us an extra one, so this will bring us to a total of a 70% increase in duration. Next, we want for the Snake just Masochistic. It just gives us a way of healing. It really doesn't do anything that much for us because nothing else here is actually going to give us any bonuses for the build, so we'll just take Masochistic here. For our skills, we're just taking Maul and Enhanced Maul just to get out of the basic tree. In the core tree, we're not using any core skills, so we're putting 3 points into the Heart of the Wild to increase our maximum spirit, 1 point into Predatory Instinct just to get the extra bonus for Iron Fur, so we're going to put 3 points into Iron Fur here, and into Digigrade Gate for some movement speed while we're in werewolf form. In our defensive tree, we're putting 1 point into Earth and Bulwark, and we're going to take the point to make us unstoppable and the point to give us some Fortify. We're putting 5 points into Cyclone Armor so we can get the maximum non-physical damage reduction. Then we're also adding Enhanced Cyclone and Preserving Cyclone so we can get a increase in damage reduction for 2 seconds every 10 seconds. We're taking a point in Backlash because we use all 4 defensive skills, so this is just a way of getting us a damage multiplier. Then we're taking 3 points in Ancestral Fortitude and Vigilance just for some flat damage reduction when we use a defensive skill, and then some flat non-physical resistance. We put 1 point into Blood Howl, taking Enhanced Blood Howl to Innate Blood Howl. Blood Howl will always be the last skill we use before we go into our Lacerate to ensure we get the 25% damage bonus here. Debilitating Roar, here we're taking the Innate Debilitating Roar for a damage multiplier that's added while Debilitating Roar is active. And we're basically just snapshotting that bonus onto our Lacerate when we use it. So generally you're going to use Debilitating Roar, then Blood Howl, then Lacerate to get the most damage. In the companion tree, we're just taking Feral Aptitude, 3 points. It increases our damage while we're healthy. When we're lacerating, we're immune to damage, so we're almost always healthy. And then it also increases our damage by 30% for having max move speed, which we will have almost all the time as well. In the Wrath tree, we're taking no skills here. We're just putting 1 point in Neurotoxin, 1 point in Toxic Call, and 3 points into Envenom. We're doing this just to make sure we get the a way to get the poison on enemies, and That way we can get the crit strike damage bonus against poisoned enemies. Last, for our ultimate tree, we're putting 3 points into Catastrophe, so whenever we use Lacerate, we're going to get a 20% damage increase for 8 seconds after casting the ultimate skill. We're putting 5 points into Lacerate to make sure we get that damage multiplier to Lacerate for our crit damage bonus. And then obviously taking everything else on the tree, because we get to the last one, whenever we critical strike, we'll get up to a 40% damage multiplier for 25 seconds for each critical strike. So we're basically getting a 40% multiplier on Lacerate every time after we activate it at least once. Putting 3 points into Quick Shift, again, just a damage multiplier while we're Shapeshift. We're putting 3 points into Heightened Sense. This will just give us some damage reduction and movement speed. We're putting 2 points into Natural Fortitude, so whenever we Shapeshift, we'll get a bit of Fortify. 3 points into Defensive Posture. This is just going to give us some damage reduction while we are fortified, while increasing how much Fortify we get. We're going to then put 1 point into Nature's Resolve, so whenever we get struck, there's a chance we're going to Fortify. Then 3 points in Unrestrained, so that way, when we're fortified above 50%, if we do happen to get hit by a control impairing effect, there's a 40% reduced duration on that. And then lastly, for our key passive, we're taking Lupine Ferocity, so whenever we critical strike, we're dealing a massive damage multiplier thanks to the Malefic Crescent. Next, for the Paragon board on our starting board, we're going to run the glyph Fang and Claw. Moving to our next board, the Inner Beast, we will run Outmatch as our glyph. Moving into Heightened Malice, we're going to run the glyph Spirit, making sure we take the Heightened Malice legendary node. Next, for Ancestral Guidance, we are going to take the Werewolf node here. Then for our last board, we're going to be running Lust for Carnage and running the Dominate glyph here. For our Mercenary, we'll run Variana. We'll run her because she'll give us a source of vulnerable. And we will take her No Escape, which will help pull in enemies, keeping them grouped together. So when we use our Lacerate building up to the boss fight, we will should just obliterate the enemies. Then for our reinforcement, I'm running Reinhardt, and we're running the Bastion to just give us a source of Unstoppable and some damage redirection when we get injured, which can save you in a second if we don't have Lacerate up to avoid the damage. Lastly, for the Occult Gems and the seasonal abilities, we're taking the Phantom Strings, as this is going to give us a overpower crit damage multiplier. We're taking Friend of the Bog. This is going to give us an 8% multiplier to our core stats with a 10% to life, as well as give us Unhindered, which allows us to move through enemies. And then lastly, we would want Voice of the Star here regularly. So we're just running your common Eldritch Witch powers are 25% more potent, but this will be replaced with Voice of the Star, which will give you a damage multiplier to your ultimate skill while making it count as every witch power. For the Witchcraft, this will change once you have Voice of the Star, because right now we are running the Cycle, Soul Harvest, and Aura of Siphoning to give us our 3 Growth and Decay abilities to turn on Friend of the Bog. We run Soul Harvest specifically because it's another core stat multiplier, and since we're grouping up enemies so much, it'll be easier to get that maximum bonus for this. We're running Force of Will as a Psyche power, as whenever we kill an enemy, it's going to give us a multiplier that is added to our overpowers, and it will be our next 2 overpowers, so this becomes quite powerful. Shaken Soul, we're using this temporarily since we don't have Voice of the Star. It just allows us to keep vulnerable up on our enemies. We will swap this out for Purging Touch once we get Voice of the Star, as this will give us a damage multiplier to our ultimate skill. Next, we're running Hex of Flame. This gives us a hex that we can put on enemies, and with this hex, we're going to get that overpower multiplier from the Phantom Strings. And there you have it for our version of the Lacerate Druid. In the description, I've left a link for both Danger's build and my build for the Lacerate Druid. I recommend checking out Dangers. I believe his is probably the better version, but ours is alright. It can still do pit 100s. Also, leave a comment letting me know what you think of our build. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more builds like this. And if you want to try something different, why don't you check out our Shred Guide? The Shred Druid has been fun. We got it to push to pit 95, so I recommend checking it out. But that's it for today, folks, and we'll catch you next time. Bye!